the rest of our audience in, can you kind of tell me how you got to be a part of the ATU, unions, all that other good stuff? Do you come from transit? Like, when did you decide that, you know what, fighting for the worker, fighting for the operator, when did you kind of come to that decision of, this is what I wanted to do? Kind of give us the spill in your background.
Yeah, sure. So I can tell you, I came from a three-generation union family. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college.
Nice.
So I really kind of grew up. My grandfather was the international representative for American Flint Glassworkers Union. We were originally from Jersey. You'll hear it come out in my accent sometimes here. Um, and, I always knew, okay, labor and being part of this movement is something that's really important. And then when I got down, I got lucky enough, I got a scholarship to GW. Um,
Nice. Both of them.
and yeah, and
Nice.
so when I got there, I originally thought I wanted to do like something foreign affairs like and international relations. But ironically, the degree forced me to take economics and political economy. And
Wow.
when I started delving into that, I started seeing, oh wow, this isn't just like important to my family. This is important to everybody, right? This is
Yeah.
having a strong labor movement is an essential part of making sure that we have a fair economy, a fair polity, fair a fair workplace for everybody. So I got involved in a lot of DC labor fights, be it making sure that we were phasing out the tip minimum wage, making sure that we were having folks going after people who were stealing, going after wage theft, especially at the building trades, union apprenticeships, all that kind of stuff. And so through that, I kind of got involved and got to know some folks who were in the labor space. I worked on campaigns and I worked on political and advocacy work for a little while. And then the guy that I knew jumped over from Local 689 and decided to become political and legislative director over at the Maryland AFL-CIO, where he is still
Okay.
at rival. And so this opened up and kind of the rest is history. I applied and then I remember my first day, I was out in Loudoun County for contract negotiations out there. And within 12 hours of that, we walked out of negotiations out there with Keolis. And I was on the picket line the very next morning. So it was baptism by fire, so to speak. But
Yeah.
it was with one of the best crews that I could have ever asked for with it. And these folks have really become my family. It's been, a pleasure and honor to get to know everybody at the ATU crew, to get to fight for them. I was a Metro rider far before, I was
Really?
this. Yeah, absolutely. Because when I came down
Nice.
to DC, for GW, I always used to take the Metro all around. So, I always cared about it. And as a rider and as a resident, and I always had the labor perspective going in. And so kind of this meshed a lot of interests and skills and backgrounds that I don't know, it just came together in a really wonderful and perfect way. And so ever since then, I've first came on as political and communications organizer because we weren't sure if Brian was coming back or not, whether he was on loan to the AFL or not. And then once it was clear, I became and took on the full director role and now have a communications associate on board who is fantastic. His name is Ben Lynn. And we work together as a great team with the rest of the crew there, making sure that we are fighting for riders, workers, and transit all throughout the DMV.
That is cool, man. So you mentioned you're a local guy. So typically us on the media side, sometimes we cannot understand the gravity of a situation.
Yeah.
You being a local guy, just recently here in this region, we had something, at least in my lifetime, that was unprecedented. We seen a strike, and not just like a 1 or 2 day. We've kind of all been exposed to those, but this
Mhm.
one lasted days, 2+ weeks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
In albeit one of the wealthiest regions, if not the wealthiest region in the entire country. I'm also a local guy, so I've
Yeah.
caught I've ridden the Fairfax connector, Wamata. You guys service Tyson's Corner, Loudoun County. Like this is for the viewers that don't understand. This is a big deal. This is an incredibly like things like this for agencies like this in areas like this just do not happen, and they should not happen. But it did, and Matt being a part of the ATU, having the conversations with the drivers, and I know this is never an easy decision to probably ever come to, but if you don't mind, just kind of like walking our viewers through, like how did we get there? If you don't mind me asking, how did we?
Yeah, sure thing. Absolutely. So let me back up a little bit and I can talk a little bit about the entire union and our perspective on it. And then I can go a little bit in perspective of what was going on at Fairfax Connector and even a little bit of the history of how we've been there. So Local 689, we represent over 15,000 transit workers throughout the
Wow.
DMV, be that Metro, DC Circulator, Streetcar, Dash, Fairfax Connector, Loudoun County Transit. We even have Charles County school buses.
Really?
So yeah, so we're all over the region. We are going to have an election over at Art in Arlington,
Yeah.
just in I would say about week and a half, 2 weeks at this point. So we are a growing union. We are not unfamiliar with having to unfortunately fight tooth and nail on this. We also represent like MTA commuter buses, so Coach USA, all that. So let me say as well, we are also an old union. We are over 100 years old at this point. We go back to when it was Capital Transit and the DC streetcars all up and down here. So we are a union that has had to unfortunately take exploitative transit jobs and turn them into transit careers. And unfortunately, over the past number of decades, as is common throughout, and you'll hear this throughout the rest of the labor movement, there has been super fierce opposition to workers' rights. People are seeing the Amazon and Starbucks playbook and deciding to take that for themselves and implement it within their industries, whether they be unionized already or whether they have an interest in unionizing. We saw it out in Loudoun County Transit, where we had a nearly 2-month strike last year, I can tell you. And I can tell you, this is not the first time we've had to go on strike over in Fairfax as well. We had one back in 2019, if I'm correct. I think a brief one in 2020, right? So we have had a history with having to do this. And unfortunately, part of the reason for that as well is that these systems, these local systems, first came about to break this union. Fairfax Connector, and you can read the Washington Post article on it from back in, I want to say, the 80s, was specifically designed to, quote, save costs by cutting pay for the already unionized WMATA drivers, to get a private contracted service to take over those routes for WMATA, pay the workers less, and save costs through that. And when you have a contracted out service like you're having in Loudoun County, like we have in Fairfax County, right, with the connector, this is what happens, because this is based on taking an essential public good, which is transit, for so many people, and putting it in the hands of a, frankly, multinational company here. This company is based in France, Transdev, which, like any company, even ones that are more charitable than Transdev, its bottom line is making profit. It's not about delivering a public good. And so this is what happens when you have a company that comes in, frankly, from another country with stronger labor protections over there than we have here. And it sees that, okay, this is a way for us to make money, to go to countries with lower labor standards and try to run transit there. And that's what we saw both 2019, 2020, and now, was that I can tell you we were trying to get the process started earlier on. We did not want to go to strike, but we felt forced to have to get to that point for nothing than the fact that we were working under an expired contract for months by the point of when we had called the strike. And we had reached out to the county to try to get them as their contractor to effectively get them to the table to bargain in good faith. And if they wouldn't bargain in good faith, to fund the contract in the short term and then kick them out, because I believe that their contract is up in June or July. And just take this in-house and run it as a public service, or hand it over to Omada, give it back to the authority as it was originally intended in this case, so that you can have high quality, frequent public transit that isn't built off of paying workers less. So I can tell you, in terms of the specific negotiations, we only got bargaining dates from them, I want to say October 13th, when the contract expired on November 30th. And the first time that we went to them, and our first proposal on October 13th, we didn't actually get a full response. Nothing until, I believe, around November 8th at that point.
So just to make sure I'm tracking correctly, you're saying that you guys reached out and you're saying you didn't even hear anything back, like just Casper, Ghost, they left you on red and the DMs kind of thing. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct. We came with a full contract proposal ready to go, and we got no response for weeks. So this was a company that wasn't serious about negotiating in good faith when you don't even show up and have your homework done on it, right? And are waiting until less than 4 weeks before the first contract expires to even provide us a response to our first proposal. Yeah, I'm looking at, our bargaining updates as we speak, and the first time that they gave us a response was November 8th. So almost 3 weeks to the day of when that contract would have expired, and rejecting a whole ton of the proposals. This wasn't like, okay, we just need to make minor, tweaks here and there, and this is about like, okay, small language and grammatical mistakes. These are major provisions, be it on wages, healthcare, retirement, sick days, that are just being rejected out of hand with 3 weeks to go. So we were willing even to have multiple bargaining sessions beforehand. But on the critical issues, which ended up being the economic ones, we just weren't getting dealt with in good faith. And I can tell you, for example, there were multiple times where they came to the table and they said, this is our last, best, and final, meaning this is all the money we have. This is all we can give, take it or leave it, or, we will declare an impasse and, we'll bring in an arbitrator or whatever. That just kept, funnily enough, they kept finding more money as we rejected those proposals. Be it on wages, be it on retirement, be it on healthcare and sick leave, right? They somehow kept finding more money as this went on. So it became clear that we weren't being dealt with in good faith, and they just didn't want to budget to fulfill the full terms of the contract. And so I can tell you, eventually we kept going through this, and by the time we got to about mid to late December, I think December 22nd, we had a tentative date set there. We just weren't seeing that things were moving along. We did meet with the staff of the chair of the county, Jeff McKay. I believe his chief of staff met with us. And we expressed, look, we are trying our best. We do not want to have a labor action going on. But if they continue apace and there's no pressure applied from the county to come to the table and just deal with us in good faith, then this is going to be inevitable. There has to be a change in this pattern going on.
Wait a minute. So not to interrupt you, but so
No,
are you
please.
saying that in a sense the powers that be were warned that this could potentially happen? Are you saying that this not necessarily threaten them, but hey, this is a possibility if we don't get this done? That
Oh,
was
absolutely.
discussed?
Yes,
Wow.
completely. Um, because thereafter we had a strike authorization vote that was scheduled, because I can tell you the members themselves were not pleased with this contract. And this is going to become evident in the next sentence that I'm about to say. And that when we had the strike authorization vote, we had over 2/3 of all of the operators and mechanics show up, and 99% of them voted in favor of strike authorization. So it wasn't, a far off or remote thing that, okay, this could happen, probably not. This is no, these folks are really fed up. They know that their wages are not competitive in this contract to where the rest of the region is, be it, Dash or Loudoun County, or especially we try not to throw in Metro in there just because we understand that these are smaller transit systems, and frankly, their whole setup is that, okay, we don't have as much money as Metro, economies of scale. And also, frankly, we understand that, and we know that they were kind of set up on a county level, so they can't tap into the same funding sources that per se these state ones, with Metro having jurisdictions funding it, be it the whole Northern Virginia municipalities and Virginia itself, Maryland, DC, the federal government, at least on the capital side, right? Fairfax County just doesn't have those same levers to pull as Metro does.
So
So
Matt,
yeah,
you mentioned something that kind of caught my attention that
yeah,
and this is educating me. This is very informative. So you're saying that almost 2/3 of the people voted to strike. Now, help me and my audience understand when operators or workers vote to strike. And again, I want to be transparent and like blunt. Like I want to really understand the gravity of this.
yeah.
These guys aren't getting paid during this.
Well,
Or
no,
is it
they're not getting paid through the company, but I can tell you, like, we have a strike fund as a union. That
okay?
is, different unions have different strike funds and, different rates of pay.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that the reason why folks are on the picket line and why they check in with organizers is that if you just, stay at home and do nothing, while a strike is going on, you get nothing. You don't get union strike pay, which we try to make sure these folks are kept whole. But at the same time, you're still showing up to work at this point. And everybody comes to work also in their work uniform, right? Because frankly, I can tell you, even from the first day, one of the things we said was, look, if you put the same, I said it to the press the very first day of the strike, to be clear, if they put the terms on the table on that first day, as we had at Dash over in Alexandria neighboring, on the economic terms of the contract, we would have had folks back and ready to work by evening commutes. They didn't, though. But yeah, it is a huge decision because nonetheless, strike funds can only last for so long. And there is a point in where strike funds are depleted. Sometimes they are not, and most of the times they are not as equal as what you're getting paid at work, per se. And also just the logistics of a strike are not fun, especially in the winter. Nobody wants to be walking a picket line while in the like 2 o'clock in the morning, which is when we started, in the middle of the winter. when it's
And
freezing
if
out.
and if I'm not mistaken, I remember it was a Friday, maybe 2 Fridays ago, where it rained, unlike anything I had ever seen before. And you guys were picket lines, like nothing changed for you guys. You guys still showed up to still fight for your cause. Can you, man, because this is just so educational, but can you just like talk about that, like the dealing with the elements, the pick, like that part of a strike? I know we kind of fantasize this because we see it on TV, but can you talk
Sure.
about the real, like what actually happens out here as you guys are on those picket lines and you're walking up and down the street, dealing with the elements, talking to people? Can you kind of walk our viewers through what it's like to be, in a sense, troops ground level in one of these instances?
Yeah, it's logistics, 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 in that you have to have food set up. You have to have porta potties ready. You gotta keep morale up. You gotta make sure that everybody stays for their shift. Because also simultaneously, you don't want folks crossing the line. You want folks staying out there and feeling, okay, we can do this. This is something that we need to make sure that this entire thing is shut down so that this is as short as possible, because the entire point of the strike and the work stoppage is to put maximum pressure on the employer, to come to the table in good terms and to make sure that they come to an agreement that is fair to workers. So you have to keep morale up. You have to have food there. You have to have umbrellas, ponchos. All that has to be ready. And our organizing team is second to none with being able to get those logistics out there, and keep morale up, because every single day that service was shut down when we were on strike. Um,
So, Matt, considering that, and this is going to be a little off topic, and again, if you want me to cut this out, I can. But
Hopefully,
was there at ever a point where you guys you're on the picket lines, you're marching for your cause, from the driver operator settlement? Was there ever a point where we're 1 week in, we're 9 days in, 10 days in? Was there ever a point where there was just a cloud of discouragement? Was there ever a point where generally we just kind of felt like, man, we may not get this done? Can you walk us through just the attitude, the morale, like walk us through that point where drivers discouraged it? Was there ever a point where they felt like maybe we don't get this done?
you know, sometimes there are points in that where it's just a slog and you're feeling like, this isn't going anywhere and people are crossing the line. And that wasn't the case here. I was incredibly taken aback in that all of, the communications from the line and even the press, and the public outpouring of support was incredibly positive, right? Um, in that we saw every single day that the service was being shut down. We saw Transdev having to move on its positions every single time. And we understood there were people who, and real leaders. And all of this is a testament to Fairfax Connector workers, but I especially want to shout out the leaders in those garages, at West Ox, at Cinderbed, at Huntington, in that they all really came together and reminded each other of what was on the line. There was one point I can tell you in terms of sacrifice, in that Transdev did an incredibly low life and retaliatory move that they didn't have to do. They weren't mandated by law to continue doing it, but a company that's bargaining in good faith doesn't. And that on February 29th, they provided the union and all their workers, just the morning of, a letter letting all of us know that they were terminating healthcare coverage for everybody starting on March 1st. Not even 24 hours notice. We had two members out there who were active cancer patients, one who was a father of a son who was about to start receiving chemotherapy and was using his father's health insurance. And all of them rallied around and stayed strong. As a matter of fact, one of them gave a speech to say, look, we're gonna fight this thing, we're gonna win, and we're gonna do it soon. So let's hold strong, let's hold together, let's get this done. Because they also understood that, look, the current health care, or the current retirement plan that Transdev was offering for most of the folks weren't even able to take up, because you don't, this may be a newsflash, but you don't make a whole ton of money. It's not exactly like being a financial manager, being a bus operator or mechanic, right? But the majority of folks weren't even able to have anything in their retirement accounts at that point, because the pay was so low at Fairfax Connector. So, and the cost of living is so high, that even if you're making, say, $20 an hour, right, but you're living in such a high cost of living area like Fairfax County, like DC, like Loudoun County, Arlington, what have you, you're not able to put aside 4% to have that matched by your company. So if you're not doing that, then the company's not paying anything into your retirement account, and you don't have a retirement to go to. So a lot of these folks understood that, look, we need to get this done, be it on sick days, be it on a 40-hour guarantee, was another big sticking point, in that TransDev would schedule folks for just a little bit less than 8 hours, every day or 5 days a week. And so you would be forced to come in for a 6th day. But the rest of the industry, I can tell you, be it, Dash, Connector, or now Connector, at the end of this contract, we're getting there, especially Circulator, right? They're all going to dedicated contributions for folks who are this low. So again, for the folks who are listening out there who may have a salary and may be like, oh yeah, that sounds great, I would love that. I will also say that like 8% dedicated contribution from the company putting that in, or in our case, by the end of this contract, we got 6%, is not a ton, but it adds up and it gets you something. And it's effectively the same as a 3% match you going in there, right? But again, for folks who are making wages that are that low, you necessarily can't expect to do a 3% match. So all of them understood that, look, if we want a shot at retirement, we have to get this done now. And everybody else is doing this at this point. So why is it fair that we are the only folks throughout this entire region that aren't having this covered? And the whole, 689 over 15,000 transit workers. Why is it that we are not getting a guaranteed retirement with dignity here? So folks understood that. They understood the stakes. As a matter of fact, like we got a thumping majority in the ultimate ratification vote. We didn't get unanimity though. Like there were some folks who wanted and thought we could get even more. So at this point, there are folks who, really understood that, look, this county, like you said at the beginning, this is such a big deal. And I can tell you, Fairfax Connector too, they were one of the only transit systems that stayed going every single day during the pandemic. There wasn't a single day where Fairfax Connector was shut down. So for folks who had stayed on during the deadliest pandemic in a century, who have seen increases in antisocial behavior and violence aboard public transit and towards transit workers, they understood the stakes that we were fighting for here. And every single day we were seeing that TransDev wasn't really able to defend itself, in that those offers were so below par. I remember they put out something that was so ridiculous. They said like, oh, bus operators were offering them $121,000 a year, which was just a lie. If you were, even if you were to take like the top rate, assume everybody gets, a full bonus, contributing entirely to their 401k. Like we tried every math trick in the book to get there. We couldn't even get there. Right. So, and everybody saw that for what it was. The public saw it for what it was. I think that the county officials were embarrassed by this, and I'm glad that the chair himself was embarrassed by this, because he did not reach out and return our calls after that December 22nd conversation. Neither him nor his staff would agree to even meet with us and talk with us about this. And I think that TransDev, after, again, 2 weeks of consistently shutting it down and the huge public outcry and their contract being up in a few months, was starting to understand that, look, the gig is up here. or the jig is up rather. We have to come to the table and give them a fair offer, especially with the federal mediator in the room, who, by the way, they tried to actually get removed. Um, they were high-handed enough to actually complain that the federal mediator was being, unfair to them in that they just weren't agreeing with every single premise that TransDev was putting forward. So we had, when we were seeing the federal mediator, not taking our side per se, but not caving to TransDev. We saw the public and we saw the officials. Everybody understood that this is a fight that we have to win. So I was very proud of all of them.
That's incredible. I can tell you what, Matt, I definitely did not expect this out of this interview. This was so informative, and it kind of brought me into a side of the union I ignorantly did not know anything about. So thank you for that. So as we kind of wrap up here, man, I'm so gracious. You gave me an extra 10 minutes and I appreciate it. So I definitely don't want to draw out more of your time.
No,
but for
okay.
the operators and the agencies who don't have an ATU 689 fighting for them, and they're going to watch this and they're going to, like, how can those guys get in contact with you? How can they begin that process to get more fair pay benefits? Because contractors, foreign companies, all of that stuff, it's credible, it's practical, and it makes sense. But how can those operators get in contact with you if they want to fight for the same rights that other operators are getting? And how can they find you? How can they discover you? What's the best way to contact you or the ATU? How can those guys reach out to you?
Yeah, first thing that I would say is look at the ATU itself and see. But first off, talk with your coworkers. See what you can do that is better for you and your coworkers. What do you think? What are y'all getting paid? Are your hours fair? Is your health care adequate? Do you have a real path to retirement that we're looking at here? So talk with amongst your coworkers and see what's going on there. That would be the first thing I would say. The second is that I would say that if you are not already an ATU member or you are interested in organizing, please visit atu.org. And there are plenty of resources, especially in our action center, that we have, through which, as a matter of fact, I believe it's join ATU at atu.org or atu.org, and tell us where you work, what you're interested in, or why you're interested in joining the ATU. We will have organizers come to you and talk with you and see if we can get you a contract. I can tell you, for example, our big contract that we're negotiating right now is going to be at Metro for WMATA, for all our bus operators and rail operators. If you ever come to DC, you're going to take the Metro in one way or the other, right? And so that's the contract that we're negotiating now. We are hoping that we can get another fair contract out of that, but that's going to be another big fight that we have coming up. So I would say talk with your coworkers, and then if you have that interest, go to atu.org, and I believe it's under action, and then join the ATU. There will be resources there. There are organizers from the international. I wish we could have everybody in 689, but we just cover the Metro DC metropolitan area. We have sister locals all over the country, be it in the deep South or in the North, or even in Canada, we go up to. So, because always remember too, that a union is not an outside entity, right? That's always what we hear from employers who try to scare folks in, let's say, captive audience meetings, which if you are interested in joining a union, they will likely have you do, which is that they'll bring in an outside consultant who will have a clean, slick-looking PowerPoint deck and say, hey, if you join the union, you won't be able to talk with us anymore. This family will be broken up. It'll be so, technically difficult to communicate, and our whole workflow will be broken up. First off, that's entirely untrue. because it misstates what the power of a union is, which is you and your coworkers collectively coming together and bargaining and joining your power together. Because otherwise, if you don't have that, if you don't have a contract, if you're not joining power collectively, then they can pick you off one by one. The analogy we always use is that if you have a bully that's standing up to you and you poke him with one finger, he's going to punch you back. All the fingers together, that's a fist. That's a punch. That's how you throw your weight.
Man,
Oh, Patrick, you muted. Sorry.
oh, sorry, no problem, man. That is an incredible analogy. I'm gonna please don't sue me for copyright infringement. I am definitely going to use that line. Matt, this has been great. Thank you so much for contributing this to my audience, this industry, and fight on, man. Thank you so much. Have a great one.
Of course. Thank you.